Sunday. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live. Tonight's episode, Addicted to Chaos, Forcefield. We'll get into that in just a couple of minutes. Well, welcome. We were away for a while, and we did an introductory broadcast last Sunday, shortened or abbreviated version. And now we start back again with a series, and this is the first episode of the series. I'll describe that momentarily. But as usual, we'll say hello to our panel. My name is Jason. For those listening the first time, I'm the host of the broadcast. And with me, I have three amazing people that join me every Sunday. And joining me tonight, of course, is the writer of tonight's write-up, our friend from Australia, Glenn. Glenn, take a second and say hello to the peoples, please.
Yeah, howdy. I'm thinking of substituting the cat for me.
that would be lovely.
He seems to be closer to the microphone all the time these days. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
But otherwise, it's all right.
Well, last week we talked about your trip to America a little bit. Are you at least starting to feel like you're getting your legs back under you, or is that not as much an issue for you when you travel? Or
I think being real and honest, it really did show me that when I go away, the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
This is so. To all of you younger people, I say, please make the most of every day, because you never know when your circumstances are going to change, and you may not be able to do the things that you want to.
Yeah, that's true.
It is what it is, but I've had a very good run, but boy, there's some stark reality I've been looking in the face here.
Sure.
That's for sure. So anyway, but I'm not whinging. I'm just saying. If I hadn't done the things I had done, I would be feeling pretty damn lousy right now.
Sure. Gotcha.
Thanks.
Oh, man.
Well, we're glad you're back, and hopefully things will even out. It does take time when you go away for a while to get things back on an even keel. So hopefully that'll be soon for you, Glenn. Thank you. Also with us is our friend Marisa of the Nez Lover channel. If you haven't had a chance to go visit her content, please do yourself a favor. She does artwork and occasional singing, and the people over there are absolutely lovely. All the people that she knows that spend a lot of time there in the chat. So go make some new friends. If you've got a channel, they're very promoting. They like to promote other people's channels in there. So you can post your link in there and get a chance to visit other people as well. So give that a shot. Marisa, say hello to the peoples for us, please.
Thank you, Jason. Hello to the peoples, and welcome to another edition of True Story Live here on Sunday. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to everybody who stops by and hangs out, whether you join us in chat or not. And thank you to everybody who catches that replay. If you're so inclined, please do take a moment and share the stream out on your social media. We'd really appreciate that. And as always, we're interested in knowing if you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions for any topics or true stories you'd like to share or seen shared here on this show in this format. Please reach out to any one of us. I'll put my email on the chat, and you're welcome to reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in that. Please tell me more. All right, and throughout the course of the evening, I may be sharing a link or two. If you want your link shared, please let us know. We'll do that for you. If you do not want your link shared, well, we will respect your wishes and not do that. Hello to Bobby. I love you, dear. Hello to Naughty Nikki. Thank you for stopping by. Looking forward to getting deeper than hip deep tonight. We're going to just jump in all the way. Thank you, everybody, for being here. God willing, we'll have a great discussion tonight. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marisa. Last but not least, certainly my amazing wife, Jennifer. Jennifer, take a minute to say hello to the peoples, please.
Hello, peoples. Good to be here. Oh, you guys have been missed. It was nice to have a break, but we did miss everybody. It was kind of weird at first.
Yeah.
I was like, So it's great to be back.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys. Hope you're all doing well and hope you've been doing well this summer.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I, for one, enjoyed the break, but like Jen said, we did miss everyone and miss these conversations. I've just been amazed that when we started True Story Live and then took a year off and then started back again with this particular group of people, how many different conversations we've had and how deep they've gone and what it's led to. A lot of change for us. This broadcast, in my opinion, isn't just for you. It's for us to have discussions, to dig a little deeper, and hopefully to change as a person. We hope that some of these topics have done that for you, and not in the way that we want you to, but just in general to ask some questions, for you to ponder these things in your mind, different topics that we discuss, and think about if anything is meaningful to you. And we ask that same thing tonight. Hopefully this topic will reach something in everyone or someone, even if it reaches one person. We're serving a purpose. So we're going to give it a shot. TSL, I think Marisa said hello to most people except Face the Ace. Welcome, Face the Ace, Bobby Meyer, Naughty Nikki B. And then we'll try to say hello to anyone new who pops in the chat as we go forward. All right, without further ado, tonight's topic, Addiction to Chaos, Forcefield. Welcome to part 1 of our new series, No Past, No Future. This series is inspired by the Audiomachine album Manifest, and for good reason. Tonight's selected song is Forcefield. It's the second to last song, as there is no YouTube video available. The link is in the description. In short, this series will systematically explore the metaphorical merry-go-round, MGR, of life, from what influences direct us to the MGR in the first place, why there appears to be no such comfort and security riding the said MGR, why might we bother to consider viable alternatives to the MGR when much that we have been taught says that life is set in stone and we are just meant to cop it sweet and deal with it along a set pathway. For part 1, we start at the beginning. Let's define the MGR. It's a place within us that goes around in circles when the essence of ourselves has been compromised, sometimes through conditioning, many times unknowingly. With compromise comes chaos, and what appears to happen in many cases is an acceptance that this is how life plays out, and there's not an alternative. As Jen will attest, being on the MGR means you can have an epiphany one day, then next week the wheels fall off again, and round life goes, having gotten precisely nowhere. In other words, sometimes we are unwittingly controlled by an internal force field that keeps us on the MGR. Over our break from TSL, there has been much going on behind the scenes. That will be revealed as we go along. Jen, Cripps, and I have been working through this from different angles. All began when Jen decided to look for alternatives and get off her personal MGR and release the chaos that has been with her for so long. Obviously, when a person says, quote, enough is enough, end quote, it is important to dissect as best one can why they are on the MGR in the first place. First and lastly, it is us. When we absolve ourselves of responsibility for our actions, it seems a sure way of joining the MGR experience. When we do not base our existence on love, freedom, and self-respect, where can we go but to the MGR of confusion and chaos? So what things might influence our devotion from this, so what things might influence our deviation from this core concept? Those things that tend to put pressure on us to be something we are not. Think of the role models set by our parents, siblings, friends, workmates, lovers, chance meetings, etc. We soon begin to adapt ourselves to these outside influences for our advantage. We all know it is easier to be part of the group rather than stand alone, because it takes courage to declare yourself and to be potentially isolated for doing so. Can you articulate some of the things you have embraced and rejected from your early role models? Have any of these adopted role models led to unwanted disquiet? Think about it also. Why are there so many relationships in conflict that individuals can't find a wavelength that brings them together? Thinking of this, what is the role model you wish to set for yourself? Next, because it is a topic close to the heart of Jen and Cripps, we'll dive into the conditioning of religion and how it is designed to keep the MGR spinning for those who believe. Don't misunderstand. The contention is not that God is the issue here. It's purely the contradictions that arise from how it is promoted, in my opinion. As I said to Jen and Cripps, take out the BS. Those things that are intended to control you, keep you in fear, are not based on love, and the beauty of what you have left will be revealed. Not surprisingly, I was waiting to hear whether there's an alignment of sorts with their revised concept of God and my universe construct. Hopefully that is part of tonight's discussion. When love is a common element, does it not bring people together rather than separate them? So then, why is religion so divisive at times? The universe concept is simple. Nothing is asked of me. There's no commitment. It is my choice to accept what I am given or reject it. There's no punishment or recrimination, and hence no MGR for me in this regard. I think of the religious, and I think, why would any loving God enforce rules and obligations to say, in my words, believe in me or you miss out? That sounds like FOMO to me. Fear of missing out, fear of never being good enough. Looking forward to Jen and Cripps explaining their own position in this regard. If there are other things you consider relevant, please bring them forward before we close tonight. And then I'll read the rest at the end. Right? All right, very good. I'm going to check the chat and see if anyone new popped in. Doesn't look like they have. Oh, yeah, all that fluff and stuff. All that fluff and stuff. I love it. What a great.
No, that's a great name.
All that fluff and stuff. Makes me think
another lovely channel from Australia. Hello, Fluff. Hello, Bobby. Hello, Ace. Hi, Nikki.
We have a lot of Australians in here for some reason, and there's also a couple of New Zealanders who pop in from time to time. So we're glad you guys are here. Thank you for joining us tonight. All right, we'll dive right in. I'll go back and once again read the definition to MGR, just so we're all on the same page. So it does stand for merry-go-round. It's a place within us that goes around in circles when the essence of ourselves has been compromised, sometimes through conditioning, many times unknowingly. With compromise comes chaos, and what appears to happen in many cases is an acceptance that this is how life plays out and there's no alternative. As Jen will attest, being on the MGR means you can have an epiphany one day, and then next week the wheels fall off again, and round life goes, having gotten precisely nowhere. So when we refer to MGR, I mean, I might say merry-go-round during the conversation, but that's basically what it means. All right, so we're going to go down to the first sentence before we start asking questions. Obviously, when a person says enough is enough, it is important to dissect as best one can why they're on the MGR in the first place. So Glenn asks, firstly and lastly, it is us. When we absolve ourselves of responsibility for our actions, it seems a sure way of joining the MGR experience. When we do not base our existence on love, freedom, and self-respect, where can we go but the merry-go-round of confusion and chaos? We're gonna deal a little bit with religion further down, but just in general, I would like to start us off with this one. I have often struggled with the idea of not taking personal responsibility, and I'm not even just talking about religion and Christianity, and it's not just Christianity, just all religion in general, but just in life, taking responsibility. I have often, for the middle part of my life, when I got into my 30s, into my probably mid 40s, um, my life wasn't too terrible, but a lot of things happened to me, as I've talked about many times. And for a long time, I blamed circumstances and other people. And honestly, that didn't get me anywhere. So I was on my own little merry-go-round when it comes to bringing up the same stories over and over and over again every time something happened. And I didn't even have to share it with anyone else. I did. But these were all things in my mind that would come up. The minute something seemed to fall apart, I had the feeling and the reaction of, well, of course, this is the way it is. It just is. It's destined to fail, and that's what seemed to happen. Now, it's not been in every area of my life, though. I have had what I would have considered failures. I consider them differently now, but back then I would have called it a failure, a failed marriage. I had jobs that I thought, finally, this is going to be the thing that's going to get me into the right place financially. And just to have outside circumstances. One time it was a recession, actually twice. Recessions happen. I have no control over that. It's not that I made poor decisions. It just simply is the way that it is. COVID, that happened. No control over that. But each time one of these things would happen, I just had this mindset of, well, of course, this is what I'm destined for. I am not doing that anymore. I realize that not everything that happens is because I've made a poor decision or it's reaping what I sow. In fact, that was another thing. I'll tie that into religion later on, but I'll just mention briefly here. I do believe what the Bible says, you reap what you sow. And I, in my own opinion, have been reaping good seeds for a long time. And my question has been, when am I going to sow the good works that I've done, the good efforts that I've put in? What it has all come down to for me is that it's not gotten me anywhere blaming other people or blaming my circumstances for my own life. The real change for me has been when I take responsibility for my reactions to the same circumstances. How have I been reacting to things that happen? How have I reacted when there's a recession? How have I reacted when a job I thought was going to be the thing that was going to spur me on to the next thing? How has that affected how I move forward? Now, the truth is my reactions may not directly affect my circumstances moving forward. But if I'm still living in past experience and I'm holding my expectations from the past on the future, what do I have to look forward to if that's my perception? So I literally am I'm first in taking responsibility. I started doing that some number of years ago. And now I'm in the process of working on changing how I view things and trying to focus more on my reactions in the present and not worrying about the future or imposing past circumstances on the future and assuming that this is the way things are always going to be. And I could talk a little bit more about how that has helped, and I'm happy to come back around to that, but I've hogged the mic long enough. So on this one, it's important to me to take responsibility for my actions, and blaming them on someone else has gotten me nowhere. I think it's pointless. So I'm trying not to do that anymore. Does anyone else want to go next?
I thought about explaining the MGR for me, just to give people an idea.
Yeah, great.
I don't know if other people can relate.
Sure.
So my own personal merry-go-round, which I coined, months ago, was the hamster wheel of death. Yeah. That just explained it so well. So for me, it was rehashing past stuff in an attempt to heal. I was explaining to Glenn a while back, and you, Jace, that I would, some kind of hurt memory that had happened, something that had happened or hadn't happened that hurt me. I would, be turning it over in my hands, looking at it from all of these different angles, these different facets, trying to understand something in it, thinking that it was my lack of understanding that was keeping me in this cycle of hurt. And so I'd have an epiphany, like Glenn mentioned in the write-up, but then it would come back around. And Glenn sometimes is like, this again? And luckily I'm married to a very patient man. So on top of that, so that's past. And simultaneously, because my brain kept wanting to shift between the two, and it was very erratic, shifting between that particular stuff with the past and then running down all of these hallways of the future, trying to play out scenarios in my head, kind of like, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of catastrophizing. Sure. So it was like, Jason, when I met you, you had mentioned you had this issue with waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I've definitely struggled with that too, maybe in a little bit of a different way. Yeah. But I do know being in an abusive situation and the chaos that I was living in for 14 years sort of took something that was smaller when I was younger and compounded it to be this big thing. But so I would, in my mind, run down all these hallways. Well, what if this happens? Well, then if that happens, then this, and this are going to happen. Well, what if this over here happens? Then this, and this could happen. And my brain was just insane, like going down all of these hallways of things that could potentially happen. I'm not a fortune teller, but when I was doing these things in my mind, my body was physically reacting as if these things were actually happening. So I'd have this like full body wave of emotion wash over me. My body would get hot and then cold. My heart rate would spike. My adrenals would be dumping into my bloodstream. And I would just be sitting here on the couch, it happened at random times. It could be in the car or at night or in bed. Yeah. A lot of times it would be waking me up at like 3, 4, or 5 in the morning. And sometimes it would be a thought dropping in my head. And then I'd jerk awake with my heart racing, or my heart would take off and then all the thoughts came. So it was like one or the other. Yeah. And I think this particular merry-go-round became so familiar to me that subconsciously I was convinced that this was safe because it was familiar. Right. But this past May, I was like, okay. This has got to stop. Like, what I'm doing is not working, obviously. Right. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. And then, like you, Jason, taking responsibility. I don't want to say that I was put into a class and specifically taught by any book or person to do it this way, but from observing other people and just things that have happened through my life and the experiences and the lens and perspective that I've watched life through, I came to this conclusion that the way my brain was working and doing these things, that everybody dealt with this, that everyone was walking around dealing with these particular winding thoughts, or years ago, I told my mom, I called it the Rolodex of fear. Yeah. Like one would pop up and you'd pray over it, it would go away, and then another one would pop up behind it. And it was just like, what in the heck? But my understanding at the time was what I would do is I would ride the wave out, thinking that I had absolutely no control over my thoughts and my feelings. Now, I would pray, and sometimes that did help, but it was always this merry-go-round where it would swing back around. Yeah. And I didn't understand what was happening, but I truly did not know there was another choice. I didn't know there was another option than to do what I had been doing. Yeah. So this past summer, coming across a couple of different tools that have just revolutionized things and healed me, right? To where I'm still flabbergasted that I'm not in that place anymore where I feel like I'm going insane in my head. Yeah. And it's so funny because I thought this was so normal and that everybody dealt with it. I wasn't talking to Jason about it. Right. I think part of me thought he knew from the things that I had told him, but I had never really sat him down and explained what exactly was going on in my mind and how it was just like a spring being wound up past its like breaking point and being let loose, and just a whirlwind of shit. Excuse my language. It's just like, oh my gosh. and I think a lot of times I thought it's ADHD that could be a part of it, but I do think in a sense, I sort of gave it power over me.
Sure.
But I didn't realize that I don't have to.
Right.
I don't have to give it power. And there's another way to do the whole thing with when it comes to our thoughts and our feelings. And I want to add on to the end of this. I've spent years thinking about the scripture, taking every thought captive.
Right.
I don't remember which scripture it is. Now, I understood the concept to an extent, but no one ever explained to me how. So I thought the only way to take every thought captive was to pray.
Right.
That was just the logical explanation that I sort of, 1 + 1 = 2 kind of a thing. But it wasn't all of the information, in my opinion.
Sure.
So anyway, hope you guys followed that. That was what I was going to share.
No, that was great. And
Chris, I would very much like to hear, as you for the show and for me too, you're in a relationship with Jen. How did it look from your angle, just to watch Jen go through this process? I mean, how did you deal with it? What did you do to support Jen, and when did you know? How did you figure when to back off, etc., etc.? Because it seems to be like a very fine balancing act of wanting you to give someone a hug and at the same time say, well, you've got to get your shit together, sort of thing.
Oh, sure.
No, you never said that.
No.
I would have.
Well, I know you would have, and you have.
It's a fair question. It's a fair question, and I actually had planned on talking about it anyway. So thank you for bringing that up. So first, I'll say that I didn't realize how bad it was day to day. So from my perspective, what it was like is the pressure would build up, and I wasn't always sure what was going on in her head. But when it got really bad and her body started freaking out, then I would help with that. Sometimes it was cuddling. Sometimes it was me talking to her body. And for some reason, her body responds to my voice. That's a miracle of some sort. And she would be able to calm down enough to go to sleep. But I didn't know until she shared it with me in May that this was more ongoing. I don't feel like she purposefully kept it from me. It wasn't like something I'm not going to tell, Cripps about this. I think, like she said, she assumed that that's what most people deal with. And so I must just know that this is what she deals with on a day-to-day basis. So mine was.
And can I add something real quick?
Oh, sure.
I'll just add this little tidbit, is that I got so good in my past marriage of putting on this facade on the outside of my face and body while this shitstorm was going on inside of my brain that I just became very good at being stoic. And so this would be going on, and unless it built up to like what Jason said, where my body would be freaking out, it didn't look like anything was going on the outside, Okay, go ahead.
So Glenn, to answer your question, it is a balancing act, but I have not realized until recently, when it has gotten better for her, how heavy some of this has been for me. And it is something that you mentioned to me a couple months back. You mentioned it not to me personally, but to Jen. I don't remember exactly the way you phrased it, but in essence, the way I took it was you were saying, this has to be hard on Cripps. And I thought about it at that time, and I tossed around in my mind. And at that time, I had the answer that it doesn't feel difficult to me. I have a history of dealing with family members and being around women who were very anxiety ridden. My mother, she was also stoic. She didn't allow her daily anxiety to take her down for very long at all. I remember there have been a couple incidents like my uncle, my great uncle, her uncle killing themselves. And I remember that took her out for a whole day, and she just cried in her room. There were things like that, but most days I was a witness to someone that had a lot of anxiety, but just continued moving forward. So that's one aspect of it. And then my first wife, she was the opposite. She had this probably same type of anxiety as my mother had, but she did let it take her down every day. She spent more time in bed than anyone I have ever been around. And it was through that I learned how to be very patient. And I would occasionally talk to her and say, hey, I would like for you to get some help. And she went through the motions. She had a therapist, and I would sit in on some of the sessions and stuff, but it was just kind of like going and talking to a friend, in my opinion, that she would do. She wasn't doing any of the suggestions that the therapist said to do. So in essence, it was someone that deals with anxiety and depression, but doesn't really do anything about it. So it was an ongoing thing. And then lastly, I've been in groups. I have some experience with one-on-one counseling and group counseling where I saw people that were, in my opinion, in their reactions way worse than anything I've ever seen. People rocking back and forth and crying and yelling and throwing things. And none of the people, including my ex-wife, had those kind of reactions. So all that to say, some of it is beyond me. I don't know how I've reacted so well or how I've handled it so well. The other part is that I feel like I've had decades of training in being supportive and encouraging. But I never did say to Jen, you need to just snap out of it, or what's wrong with you? I never said anything like that. My role, in my opinion, was to be a support system and to help her talk through things and to make suggestions. And that's all I've ever tried to do. And I will add one more thing is that this merry-go-round, I didn't realize that that's what this was. What I saw is every couple of months, maybe a couple times in a month, her body would freak out, and I thought it was outside of her control. I really did. So I would just help her.
Same.
Help talk it down a little bit, as I mentioned, and then she would even out a little bit, and it seemed to help, and then she would go back to sleep or go on with their day. And so that's the way it was.
And I was under the impression that each cycle, it was getting a little bit better each time, which I think in some areas it was, but it still wasn't enough.
Well, that's where I disagree a little bit, because I don't see it as it was exactly the same every time. Now, that's just my opinion, and it doesn't really matter. What matters, Jen, is your experience. If you feel like there wasn't any change, that, that's you saying that. My perception was that there is some benefit to digging into the reasons why this stuff is happening in the first place. And that each time you do that, you delve into it. Now, I'm not saying that a person should just live in the past their whole life. I'm not saying that, but I do believe that if you don't look at why these things are coming up in your body, and you don't look at the trauma, then you're just destined to continue to repeat it, or you go into an avoidant stance where you just block the stuff out, and then it's a pressure cooker, and then you have an explosion, and it caused more damage than it would if you just dealt with the stuff in the first place. But the last thing I'll say is to me, it's been a miracle. First, that Jen responds to my voice or the way I talk or saying soothing things, encouraging things. I just marvel at it, because it is, like I said, beyond me. The balancing act part, I don't know how I've done that. I really don't, other than what I've mentioned, having some training and, psychology background, and have read a lot of books. And of course, my mother was an excellent therapist, and she shared a lot of things with me and made me read a lot of books. And I'm grateful for every book I've read. But I don't think that's enough. I mean, I think there are plenty of people out there who have degrees in psychology, and they have a loved one that suffers from these things, and they don't know the first thing to do. But I'm a soldier when it comes to emotional stuff, and I'm in it for the duration. So in my mind, there's never been a thought to leave or to give up or to react out of anger or frustration or annoyance or anything. And I have not done that. And so recently in May when she shared these things with me, and she's some of these tools that she's talked about. I felt a tremendous relief in me now that she has a grip on some of the stuff, and it's not nearly as heavy. And as I've said to Jen several times, sometimes you carry something around, you don't know how heavy it is until the weight comes off of you. And so I admit that the stuff with Jen, the things that she deals with, has been a weight for me. It's a weight I'm willing to carry, but it's a lot better when I don't have to carry it. And she's carrying that herself. And that's been a tremendous thing, a miracle. Thank God. It's been wonderful. All right. Hopefully I answered your question.
You did.
All right. Marisa, do you have an opinion on this? When we absolve ourselves of responsibility for our actions, it seems a sure way of joining the MGR experience. When we do not base our existence on love, freedom, and self-respect, where can we go but to the merry-go-round of confusion and chaos? You have any thoughts?
No, actually, I was just kind of just letting you guys have your conversation. Really, I mean, I know what it feels like to go round and round on the merry-go-round, and I know what it feels like, certainly, to, not own up to things that I need to own up to. I know what it feels like to be the cause of my going around and round on the merry-go-round. And I think the only thought I can add right now is how important accountability is and introspection is to not only see what keeps us on the merry-go-round, but what we might need to adjust or change or own up to finally get off the merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about all I got to add.
Okay.
That was good. Can I add something?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Jen. No,
wait, did Glenn want to go first?
No, you go. You're good.
Okay. One thing I was going to add that I'd written down is this particular merry-go-round, for me at least, was a thief. It was stealing me being in the present moment.
Yeah.
And because I was always in my head, either ruminating about the past or running down hallways of the future. And so there was just this small percentage of me that was present, like in this beautiful present moment. And so just learning how to distance myself, not in a cold way, but like observing my thoughts and feelings instead of getting sucked up into them has been a big, big deal.
Yeah.
And also learning that I'm not necessarily my thoughts and feelings has been a big deal as well.
That's huge.
It is huge, because if I was feeling sad, I just would go down into this downward spiral vortex of negativity, it seemed. I would get sucked down into it, gosh, I'm just such a sad person or whatnot, just AKA as an example. But now it's being able to, there's something about being in the present, like being able to anchor yourself in the present instead of doing all this crazy running down past or future. That's just a beautiful thing. It's such a gift. There was one, and it was in the beginning of the summer when this whole journey started. And I'd went to grab tea with my niece, Jason and I's niece, Dre. And normally when I would get together with people, and there's so many tentacles of this that kind of play into all kinds of things in a life, in someone's life. But because of this merry-go-round situation, I would meet with someone and I was dealing with insecurity, being hypervigilant of stuff, which a lot of that had to do with the insecurity, but also, my past and abuse stuff. But I would be so in my head and not fully present with the person that I was talking with and genuinely wanting to connect with. Right. And I felt like I just couldn't control it. It's like I would get sucked up into my head. And so it made me not a very good listener. I do think people can tell. Yeah, I do. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
I think people can tell too when you're not fully present, when you're distracted. You know what I mean? And like, I don't think, I don't want people to, either way, it's not fun to talk to someone or try to be connecting with someone when they seem so distracted. Cause I think some people would assume, wow, this person doesn't really want to hang out with me or spend time with me. They could potentially, think that. So it's important to, like I've always told Jason, he's a very good listener. And when you talk to him, it's very obvious that he is 100% listening. You're being seen, you're being heard. You know what I mean? So me getting sucked up in my head was not a good thing. But this time I went out with Jason's niece, or my niece, Dre. It was like I didn't do that thing that I was so used to doing. Like, because I truly felt like I had no control over it. Right. So I do this like internal eye roll, like, here we go again. But it was so funny because when we were done with tea, I actually opened up to her and I told her, I said, look, for the longest time, I have had this issue with these things. And I didn't have that now. Sometimes I wouldn't have it because I was very comfortable with the person, Right. But I was just explaining to her, like, I don't remember all the words I used or what I said, but I just was so excited that I didn't get sucked up into my head and overthinking things. And it just was wonderful. It was very freeing to be present.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it really is.
Thank you, Jen. The only thing, and it's you saying it, but I still don't feel, even though you told me this is kind of where your mind goes sometimes. You're going to say that sometimes when you have interrupted me, that is the proof somehow. But you always have, if you interrupt, it's usually at least based on the conversation that we're having.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not some external thing. So maybe it's just that my perception of when someone is not present is that they're talking about other topics that don't have anything to do with what the conversation is about. I probably would notice it more if that were the case, but it is what you say it is. And it's something that you've worked on, but I didn't ever know that you weren't totally present with me. But then your caveat is, if you feel comfortable with the person, it isn't as bad. And I know that you're comfortable with me. So maybe that's the case. I don't notice it as much because of that reason. But when you're with someone else, it could be completely different, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It varies.
Sure. Glenn, you're up on this one.
Yeah, I can relate. I could relate to what Jen's been through, even because I did this like a long time ago, but I remember how difficult it was. But I remember I constantly, and I'd go and say to Sandra, or roll my eyes and go and say to Sandra, Jen's had another meltdown. Because I was getting frustrated like crazy because like it just got to the point, well, what are we doing here? We just like, the wheel keeps spinning. What's going on? Why can't she get it together? What's the problem here? And I so wanted to say to Jen, look, would you like another something
option?
Consider option. Yeah. But I said, and I thought, no, Jen has to go to the bottom of the barrel and say, I've had enough, or I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. It's getting me nowhere. That's the point where you prepare to listen. Before then, you're not in the right space because, you tend to be negative. When you go to the bottom of the barrel and can't do it anymore, you then become much more open because you're desperate.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree.
A whole new perspective on it because you'll try anything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So it's been fascinating to watch it all unfold.
Yeah.
I don't roll my eyes anymore.
Oh, that's good.
For a second there, I thought you said roll my R's. I was like, what? Like, and then I was like, oh yeah, eyes. Okay, eyes.
If you're British, you have to drop your R.
Yeah.
Word, not word.
Yeah.
We do the word again.
So that's sort of, it's been really good to observe it, to be honest. Just to go through some of Jen's thinking, it's really amazing, actually.
Yeah.
But that all comes down to taking responsibility and try to let go of the bullshit.
Yeah.
Isn't that the bottom line? Well, to take away those things that are causing you to be how you are at the moment, as you live your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
It sounds really easy, but it isn't.
It was
It's
hard.
It's not easy.
Yeah. I felt like I was at war this summer between my old programming and this new, these new techniques that I was using.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very well known to a lot of people that you can grab a hold of your thoughts and observe them and decide to think something different. I had no idea,
Yeah.
no clue. I seriously thought they ran the show, thoughts and feelings. So I just went with it, and it was the frickin' merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? Like, you take away the crap and you feel empty because you're missing what you had, and you suddenly, when you take it away, it's all empty and it feels really weird.
Yeah.
You have to, you got to, it takes time to adapt to that.
Sure.
So, yeah, keep it up, Jim. Well, we're going to explore this a lot more.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
In the coming period, but just to hear where you were, Jen.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how difficult, like, this has been.
Yeah.
Just to live day to day for you. It's pretty.
Yeah.
It's pretty imposing thought for anyone if that's going through a similar experience.
Well, sure. And I can tell Jen that it's not just her. I mean, maybe everyone doesn't go through this, but a couple people in the chat have mentioned that they do some of the same. They can acknowledge that they go through some of the same stuff. So it's clearly not just you. And frankly, some of the tools that are out there to help with this, the tools wouldn't be available if people didn't deal with this stuff. I mean, it is, as it will become very apparent in the weeks and months to come as we delve a little deeper into some of this stuff, it is very prevalent. I mean, it's in society. And just going back to something Jen said about take all thoughts captive, nobody tells you how to do that or what that looks like. And,
Yeah.
she said, oh, I just thought we're supposed to pray. And I
think there's a lot more participation than what I believed before.
No, that's right. That's exactly what we're learning. And like I said, we'll get into the religion part of it here shortly. But I'll just say from the outset that sometimes participation, well, all times, in my opinion, participation is required. But what we're told is, oh, we just pray and it makes it better. And as Jen said, sometimes she would pray and it would go away, but then it would come back, because there's something more here than just praying things away. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. I have a lot to say about the religious side of it, but
yeah,
we'll get there. I just want to say hello to John Robb. Yeah, please do. Just welcome, John Robb. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just was going to say there's been a lot of instances in my own walk in believing in God and Jesus that I really wanted to be rescued, like clean slate rescued without having to do anything. And that's just me being honest.
Yeah.
And there's been so many times where I truly feel like Father God has brought me to a point where he's like, you need to participate more. This isn't about me swooping in and, scooping you up on my white horse, so to speak, but that he truly wanted me to learn how to participate more. And that is what this is for me, taking every thought captive. And I'm definitely not saying that prayer is not incredibly powerful. It is. But I think in the way he's created our minds and our brains and how they work, like I truly feel like they are an organic computer, the way he's created us. And we do get programmings from our family, from society, from friends, from boyfriends and girlfriends and TV shows. I mean, the list goes on. And I don't think we don't realize that we have a programming that sometimes, more times than not, runs on autopilot, and we wonder why we're stuck on this merry-go-round. And it's like, oh, I can actually participate and do something to change it. Yeah. Like, hallelujah. That's awesome.
Indeed. Yeah. Jen, while you were talking, just real quick before we move on, we all know about that. Sometimes it's a picture, footprints in the sand, and there's two sets of footprints, and then we're having a conversation with Jesus, and that's when I walked with you, and then there was only one set, and the guy says, "Why is there only one set of footprints?" And then Jesus says, "Well, that's when I carried you." I feel like it's more accurate. There's always two sets of footprints, if anything. I'm not saying that there aren't times that Jesus carries us, or we have to be rescued, or we have to be lifted up. But within Christianity, the way that it's taught, for the most part, is that we're waiting for some kind of rescue. In theological terms, we're waiting for a rapture to come. We're waiting to be taken out of this world, and even in living this life, we're looking forward to the eternity. And I've been part of that, and fortunately, I am in a place now where I realize that I don't know how much time I have here, but I'm here for a reason. I'm here. There's a purpose for me being here. And I want to make the best of it while I'm here. I want to make sure I'm doing whatever it is that I'm supposed to do while I'm here. I'm not just living for some kind of rescue. And that's where participation for me comes in, that I'm supposed to participate in this life. And I have found, at least for me, this may not be true for everyone, but I have found in my own walk that God wants me to participate with him. He doesn't always just rescue you. And I think that there's so many people that view it the other way. Like they look at their life and they're waiting for some kind of rescue from their problems. And because that's what they're told to do. Well, just pray and it'll be fine. Well, don't get therapy, because that's of the devil. Don't take medications because those are horrible for you. And they're from pharma. It's all magical gobbledygook, and some of it is. You have to be very careful what you put in your body. I'm not saying that, but I have gotten a lot of peace that passes all understanding when I've learned how to take responsibility for my own actions, not blame it on Satan or demons or the world. I mean, the world is responsible. My parents are responsible. Friends and teachers and government and politics and religion, they're all responsible, but they're not lining up at my door wanting to make things right for me. They're not. So for me, it comes down to what am I going to do? How can I participate with God to make a better life for myself and for others? How do I be that light that the Bible talks about being?
Yeah.
How do I not allow my light to be snuffed out or hidden under a bushel? What does that actually look like? I mean, the verse is quoted many, many times. Yeah, we're supposed to be a light, a city that's set on a hill and will not be moved. Well, what does that look like in the real world? How do we do that? So we'll get into a lot more of this. This is great stuff. Hello to Celine, who just popped in the chat. Welcome, Celine. We're glad you're here. Hope you're doing well. The next one is, think about it also. Why are there so many relationships in conflict that individuals can't find a wavelength that, wait a minute, I rolled forward. My fault. So what things might, yeah, I know, right? So what things might influence our deviation from this core concept? Those things that tend to put pressure on us to be something we are not. Glenn, can you fill this part out a little bit more? What are you asking here? I want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
Basically asking people from their personal point of view, what influences have led them to deviate from essentially their authentic self, and that's put them on the spinning wheel.
Okay, good question. So in the sentence above, you say, when we do not base our existence on love, freedom, and self-respect, where can we go but to the MGR of confusion and chaos? So I'm going to use that as a base. So what things might influence our deviation from the core concept? Those things that tend to...
Ooh.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
I think sometimes it can be parents. I think sometimes parents, whether they do it on purpose or subconsciously, they put an idea through expectations on their kids that they want them to be either a mini me, or they have a specific outlook of what they want their child to be and grow up to be,
Sure.
instead of embracing who they are and getting to know their child. And this goes into so many different paths, their likes, their passions, what school they want to go to. I mean, like all kinds of things. I think that happens to a lot of people. They get stuck under this expectation of their parents to do things the way they did, or their parents did, or a way
Sure.
another sibling is doing. Or we chatted a few months back about this, regarding some children's book stories, where sometimes you have a parent that's wanting to live vicariously through their child and live out a dream that they didn't get to live. Sometimes it's just they want them to be just like them, and they don't understand, this little person you birthed is a completely separate individual than you, a completely separate spirit and soul than you. And instead of trying to squeeze them in some box or cookie mold that you've concocted in your mind, get to know them as an individual. And so when you have that pressure from parents, I think any kid, sometimes it kind of parlays into this situation where the kid is wanting to be accepted by their parent. They're wanting to be loved. They're wanting all these things from a parental figure. And so they feel like they have to either, shave off parts of themselves or deny parts of themselves, who they are in their core, or suppress, or, just all of these different things in order to make the parent happy, so that they're loved and accepted. So that's one of many, different scenarios. So that can definitely send you on the merry-go-round.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for getting started with that one, Jen. That's perfect. As I said in the past, I would have said my parents had the biggest influence on me, because those are the people I see most every day. They're the people that are, like it or not, are more responsible for instilling morals and values in me. And also, children learn by watching, even if it goes against what they say. To do as I say, not as I do, sort of mentality. For me, the church was a huge influence. Not everyone grows up in a church situation the same as me. Christian school and church 2 times, sometimes once, but church a lot. Youth group, went to church camp several times, and then seminars and weekend seminars, and just lots of influence from the church, Bible, Christian music. I grew up in that whole thing. So I would say that religion in general, and Christianity specifically, had a lot of influence. Teachers in school, they have their own. I see it now as an adult. I look back at that and I realize that each of my teachers had their own wounds and brokenness, and they put that on other children, whether they mean to or not. It happened. And then friends and friends' parents, you spend time around your friends' parents, and they have their own stuff. I mean, I had a friend whose dad was an alcoholic, and he would take us out on the boat. He was drunk as a skunk. And fortunately, we were protected, and nothing bad ever happened. But this is something that happened, and, I definitely of Generation X, and they make memes and jokes on the internet about how we drank straight out of the hose and jumped ramps in the street with bricks and wood, and didn't wear padding. But that was all true. Latchkey kids, they go outside. Our parents had no idea where we are. Now, I didn't have that as much as other kids did, because my parents were pretty controlling. But even that had a influence on me. My parents being so controlling, and I've talked about that many times. And as an adult, for some of that, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that there was some of that. I mean, who knows where I would be if they had just,
or who you would be,
who I would be if they didn't, have some kind of control, some kind of rules and guidelines and regulations. But either way, all those things, all those people, all those entities, government, and just society in general, as we've talked about on many topics, all of those things are a factor to deviate from the core concept, which by the way, for me, Glenn's example here, and it's not just his example, these are examples that are out there in Scripture. Love, especially, love is a biblical term. You know, it's we're to love God and love our neighbors ourselves. Without love, we are nothing, Paul says. Freedom, biblically speaking, is freedom in Christ, not so much freedom in the world as slavery is espoused, and certainly in the Old Testament and some in the New Testament. And then self-respect. I mean, that's a topic for another time of whether self-respect is a biblical tenet or not. But it is for me, because for me, in order to follow the 2 commandments to the best of my ability, there has to be self-respect. There has to be love your neighbor as yourself. There's that part that people overlook. They seem to overlook and focus on the other thing as being more important. Jesus first, others second, you last. Put yourself last all the time. And I think it's confused. And I think that's what leads to the merry-go-round, is putting yourself last in every, and that's why codependency is at such an all-time high and why people struggle so much with that. And then the opposite end of that is self-absorption, is people that are so broken and damaged that they just focus on themselves and nothing else. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about self-respect. Self-respect is not self-absorption. It's not narcissism. So all of these things play a part. Glenn, what do you say about this? What things might influence our deviation from this core concept? Those things that tend to put pressure on us to be something we are not.
I think I can relate personally is like modifying yourself so that you get acknowledgement from other people. That's a killer, because it puts you under a tremendous amount of stress. And on the one hand, you're fighting against the person you are, and for what? Why do we need acknowledgement from other people? Once I
Right.
get that up, well, things got a lot easier. I just said, well, I don't care what you think, bugger it.
Yeah.
It's like drinking the pink margaritas and having the guys look at me, well, I don't care. I like the pink margarita, so what?
Hey, you do you, Glenn.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. But how much pressure does that take off you for a start when you're not looking for external validation? You validate yourself first. Then if you get the validation from somewhere else, well, that's nice. But
it's a bonus.
It's not what underpins you as a person.
Right.
See, those sorts of things, they sound simple, but they're huge.
Right.
That's the example.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marisa, what are your thoughts? So what things might influence our deviation from this core concept, those things that tend to put pressure on us to be something we are not? What do you have to say, if anything?
I really don't have much else to add. I think we're pretty much getting it all. The only way you're going to change an equation is if you put in a different variable.
Ooh.
If you don't ever make any change, then you can't expect different results. And you touched on something a little earlier about, God expects us to partake and be active.
Yeah.
And to not just examine ourselves and take the beam out of our own eye.
Right.
Before picking it out of other people's eye.
Right.
But, we've got ownership to take. We've got humility to cultivate and imperfections to own up to. And sometimes that's not always the easiest thing to do.
No, I would agree.
So true.
Well, see, you had something there, Marisa. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Gold.
Yeah. Next part, think of the role models set by our parents, siblings, friends, workmates, lovers, chance meetings, etc. We soon begin to adapt ourselves to these outside influences for our advantage. We all know it is easier to be a part of a group rather than stand alone, because it takes courage to declare yourself and be potentially isolated for doing so. Yeah, absolutely. When I read this, I thought about peer pressure. Now, I'm one that prided myself that I wasn't influenced by peer pressure, and I was just lying to myself. I mean, I may not have done all the things that my peers wanted me to do, certainly, especially in school. I waited until my early mid-20s before I started giving in to previous peer pressure, but it wasn't being put on me at the time, so I didn't see it for what it was. But certainly in any situation that I found myself in, there were things that other people wanted me to do that I didn't want to do. So as I said, I prided myself on not giving into that until later, but I would give into it from time to time. And it is hard to stand alone. I mean, they've done research on this, and I've watched several psychological research things where like they have a group in a room, and they'll have 3 different spots to stand. They'll ask a question of some sort, and then if your answer is A, then you go stand over here against the wall. If it's B, et cetera, et cetera. And you're watching a video of this, they'll ask a question, and they'll all stand there and look at each other. Now, there's sometimes one person that will go stand against the wall before anyone else. So there's the one that will stand alone. And then everyone else looks at each other and decides where they're going to go based on the predominant choice. I mean, this is what they're trying to study: is what influence does peer pressure have on a group of people, and who's willing to stand alone. I mean, it's like that thing my mom had that I love. My mom loved penguins, and she had a picture that was in her office for many years. And it was, I think, 5 penguins that all looked exactly the same. And they had this one other penguin that was dressed very strangely, and it was turned a different way. And it said, "Be your own special self. Be your own special self." It's very simple message.
I like that.
Yeah, right? It's a very simple message, but hard to do. Because when you see other people doing certain things, you tend to do it. And, because I grew up in a Christian atmosphere, and I did have, quote unquote, unsaved friends, air quotes you can't see, that wanted me to get in all kinds of mischief. And I didn't fall into that at that time. And I felt, kind of prideful, kind of good about myself that, I'm standing up for my own morals and values and not being part of a group. And I suffered somewhat from that. But I wasn't really doing it because that's what I wanted to do. I was doing it because that's what I was told to do. So I still wasn't standing on my own. Well, it's taken me all this time to be able to stand alone. And for the first time in my life, I can say that I am doing that. Even to the point of, I'm sure, being considered a heretic in some ways. I mean, I am a heretic in that I believe, and I'm looking into things that are not considered part of the norm of Christianity or religion and things like that. And I'm not doing it to be a trendsetter or to put it in anyone's face or anything like that. I'm doing that because I think that's what the Bible says we should do. And I wish it was preached more, but we are supposed to search these things within Scripture and find out what's true and what's not true. The Bereans, people preach that all the time and say, yeah, we're supposed to be Bereans, but how many people actually read Scripture for themselves and dig that deep into it? I mean, some people do, for sure. And I think those people are the ones that find the most freedom, and the freedom that they find isn't always based on what all the different doctrines and dogmas and all the different church sects would say are true. Anyway, the things that I embrace, the question reads, can you articulate some of those things you have embraced and rejected from early role models? Have any of these adopted role models led to unwanted disquiet? I would say there's lots of good things that I have continued, morals and values that were instilled in me by my grandparents and even some from my parents that I have continued, and then other things that I haven't. There are some Christian ideals that I still hold to that I think are very important, but they're not just important because it's said to be a Christian thing. it's important because it should be a human thing. It should, some of the things should be common sense, like the idea of being loving and kind and considerate to people. That's not solely a Christian value. Certainly it should be, and it's in Scripture to do that, but not all Christians are following that. It's deemed as less important than doctrine, as we've talked about before. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Things I've rejected, I would say, relate to work being the most important thing, for example. I mean, I grew up with a strong work ethic, and I do believe I have a strong work ethic, but I watched my dad, as I've talked about before, watched my dad put work first. And if you asked him, he would say that, well, yeah, I've got mouths to feed and a house and a mortgage to pay and electric bills and all that. But honestly, when it all comes down to it, I would have preferred to live in a smaller house and maybe struggle more financially. We struggled plenty when I was younger. We did. Things were a lot easier when I was mid-teens into my 20s before I left home for my family. But then divorce happened. So there you go. Certain things that I saw people put first are not first for me. Work is important, but it's not the most important thing. People are to me. So that's one example of what my role models tried to instill in me that I didn't hold on to. That's not without its own inner struggle within me. I hear the voices. I tell Jen all the time, I hear my parents' voices in my head. Like, one of the things is my grandparents, until they got older, they wouldn't be caught dead laying down in the middle of the day to take a nap. And I didn't have any problem taking a nap. I'd take a nap if I felt like I needed to take a nap. Except on Sunday, we would go to church, eat a big meal, and then everybody was allowed to take a nap. So Sundays was the only, and then they would get up and go to church again. But Sundays I was allowed to take a nap. So that's one of the things. I don't have any problem taking a nap. But when I lay down to take a nap, there for a brief second, I hear that message in my head. It's like, what are you doing laying down in the middle of the day? You know, what's that about? So Jen earlier mentioned programming. There are these programs that are running in our heads. And to me, the true freedom comes when we break away from that programming and we cling to the things that are more important, love and respect and kindness and compassion, things like that. It shouldn't be as important whether you take a nap in the middle of the day or not, or whether you work 3 jobs, not because you need to, but because you're told that you need to work hard. 6 days that shalt thou labor, and on the 7th day rest. I mean, that is instilled within society, and it's put in there for a reason, because they want people to work. They want workers. They want good, obedient labor, and then no wonder divorce is at such an all-time high, and children are growing up alienated from their parents because it's more important that their parents work. I mean, they have to. They have to. It's a whole nother subject. Never mind. Role models, unwanted. Okay, I think I answered that. Jen, what do you say? Can you articulate some of the things that you've embraced or rejected from your early role models? Have any of these adopted role models led to unwanted disquiet?
Ooh, being perfect. Ugh.
Whoa.
And I've come to this realization this summer that I finally got it. Like, finally clicked for me that everything that happens is good. Everything that happens to us, when we have, like, I've had bad things happen to me, but I have learned, and I am the person in this present moment because of those things. And so in a way, it is good. And it goes back to that scripture about God using, I forget what the scripture is, God using all things to, dagnabbit, what is it?
God works.
He uses all things. Thank you. But my point in that is, like, okay, like, if I were to back up, and I used to be so hung up on making mistakes, and I would just, in my head, I would beat myself up for making mistakes. That started in childhood, and it ramped up big time when I was with my ex. I was not allowed to be human in that marriage. I just wasn't. And it happened every day for 14 years. So I really got it drilled into me. And so understanding that I am human, that I do make mistakes, but every mistake that I've made, I learned something. Even despite the beating myself up and being my own worst bully, I've still learned things. And so now it's, I embrace it.
Sure.
Mistakes aren't, I was going to say mistakes aren't bad. I understand that some mistakes are bad, that, people that make mistakes. Well, maybe that's more of a choice than a mistake. And they call it a mistake. And you're like, no, it's a choice. But I don't have to be perfect. I am me.
Right.
I don't have to strive for some otherworldly perfection to gain love or approval, acceptance. I truly think God wants me to be me. And of course, I want to be the best me I can be. Sure. But I do not have to strive for perfection. And that ties into the people pleasing and codependency. And so, in embracing that and embracing the idea of not being perfect, being human, and then letting go of this inner striving to be perfect, even with myself. I mean, it's the worst with myself. It's one of the things that kept me from doing artwork. I wanted to sit down and do it the first time perfectly. And if I couldn't, I didn't want to do it.
Right.
What the hell is that? I shared that video on Instagram with you, and the guy was talking about this very thing when it comes to creativity, that when you make a mistake, you're learning things, and that it's all about play, and it's all about being creative, and it's okay.
Yep.
So I'm letting it go. We're a waste of time.
Sure.
And it keeps us from so many things, so many good things.
It does.
Even learning sometimes. So
I'll add to that real briefly. I'll add to that briefly. You're talking about the video and making mistakes, and that's in the area of art, but it does apply to real life. Like I've mentioned before that when I was talking to Glenn about my divorce, I made the fatal error of mentioning that it was a failure, that I failed at marriage, and he really got on me about that, and thankfully so, because I hadn't seen it from that perspective, but I see it now clearly that was not a failure on my part. It happened. It was something that happened in the world. I experienced it, and I faced a lot of things that I was definitely afraid of, and avoided relationships for the better part of my life to avoid these couple things being betrayed and abandoned. Those two things, definitely afraid of those, and it consumed me. The avoidance of those things, and I ended up having to face the very two things that I wanted to avoid. But what I learned out of that, I became stronger. I was better prepared for a good marriage. I'm not saying that I feel like I should have gotten married just so I could be a better husband. That's not it. But it wasn't a failure. It was very much something that made me who I am today, and that is the byproduct of every mistake, quote unquote, mistake I've ever made. I look back at all of that, and I see that I learned from everything. Now, are there people that just make mistake after mistake? They never seem to learn from it. Yeah, there appears to be, but not me. I learned from my mistakes, fortunately, and I don't always repeat the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
And it makes me a better person. It's part of life, making mistakes, Jen. Just like Jen said, it's part of the human experience. We are not perfect people, and if you focus on perfection, you're never going to get there. And again, I use my mom again for an example. The penguins thing, and then also she had a plate on her vehicles: progress, not perfection. I used to make fun of her. I said, "What's that about? Progress, not perfection? That's ridiculous." But I get it now.
Though.
It is so good. Progress, not perfection. If perfection is the goal, you're never going to get there. You're not. It is progress, making progress in your life, not perfection. And sometimes if you're focused on the progress and just being you, sometimes you reach perfection. You don't even know it. It's perfection for you. Maybe not for everyone else, but for you, it's perfection. I love it.
That's a good point.
Thank you. Marisa, do you have any role models that you either embraced or rejected? Have any of these adopted role models led to unwanted disquiet?
No, I can't think of anybody in particular. I mean, I'm trying to do the best I can to follow Christ, and I really can't say that any person in particular, is standing out.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I really don't have anything else to add at this time.
Okay. Glenn, what about you? Role models, embraced, rejected?
Well, obviously, there's been heaps of role models. I mean, too many to even think about. But the one thing that I do think is that no matter what those role models are and were, the only one that really matters right at this minute is the one I set for myself.
Ooh.
And part of that is hopefully to be of service to the world wherever it's possible, or service to others, rather than be self-serving as such. I think that role model, that
Sure.
underpins the role model, because obviously values and all that stuff is important, the compassion, empathy, all of those things, yada yada yada. But if you can be of service to the world, what a role model it is to set out there for yourself and hopefully for your children and for those that know you.
I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that so much. All right. Glenn says, think about it also. Why are there so many relationships in conflict that individuals can't find a wavelength that brings them together? We could probably have a whole topic about this, but for me, I just mentioned this to Jen the other night that I have continued to study relationships in the past. I don't study them so much anymore because I have my own relationship and it's really working very well for me. And that's all I need to look at. And I get plenty of good stuff from that. And that's it. That's working. But in the past, before I was in a relationship, it just fascinated me that I had so many friends that got married long before I did, and then they get divorced. And I was like, what is the problem? I mean, some of the weddings I was part of, and it seemed like they loved each other, and it seemed like it was going to work out. There's always a couple that you think you make little side bets with the best man. I give it 6 months, and we shouldn't do that. It's a horrible thing to do. I mean, we should be hoping that the marriage lasts, but there are just some that they just seem to have googly eyes for each other for the initial romance and getting married. I mean, oh my gosh, my first marriage was based on my ex-wife wanting a big wedding, and she got it. Oh my gosh, she got it, and that was what she wanted. So why are there so many relationships in conflict? Individuals can't find a wavelength that brings them together. I think in short form answer, I think because people are so broken, you get two broken people together and try to get them to be in a loving long-term relationship, and it doesn't work. I think it would work. It's not just about having broken people. It's broken people that are willing to become unbroken. Or people that are willing to work on themselves. In my opinion, if you have two people that are willing to work on themselves, no matter how broken they are, each of them, if they're willing to work together, they're willing to take a deep, hard look at who they are as people and as a couple, it can work. You can get through all kinds of stuff. I mean, how many times have we heard all the stories about a marriage where someone has an affair and they actually go to counseling and they work through it, and the person takes responsibility for what they did, and the other person takes responsibility that maybe they were not giving their spouse something that they needed, and that was part of what led them to go seek something else out in a relationship. Not saying they should have done that, but I'm just saying a lot of times that's part of it. So in my opinion, people that are in a relationship, a lot of times you've got the love goggles on and you get married. This was true for me. I just wanted to be married and I overlooked red flags. Now I can't say what it is for everyone else, but for me, that's what it was. And it was a mistake in some ways. I did, like I said earlier, I did learn from it, but We couldn't get on the same wavelength because we had two very different views of life. I mean, on paper, some of the things matched up. Okay, Christian, check. Want a good marriage, check. But in terms of dealing with mental health and wanting to dig deeper, we didn't match. I mean, I've never been perfect. I wasn't perfect back then either, but I wanted to become a better person. I wanted to work on myself. And I certainly was willing to go to counseling, and the other person wasn't. And it's not just my relationships; other relationships I've seen too. You have two people where some things match up, and it seems like on paper that it works, but you just have completely different interests. And I don't mean what TV shows you watch. I mean what kind of person you want to be. I mean, to me, that's just my opinion. I think it's that if people are willing to, wherever they are at the time, willing to grow and change together, I think you can overcome anything. That's my thought. We'll switch it up and ask Marisa. Marisa, what do you think? Why are there so many relationships in conflict that individuals can't find a wavelength to bring them together?
I think a lot of people are programmed to, especially now, have things gratified instantly, and to what's the word I'm looking for? That if you don't like something, then you can scroll around until you find something you do like. I think there's a lot of that going on right now, and I really do. I think the way things have progressed with technology, especially, I think that's giving people a disposition that if they don't like where they're at or who they're with, that's just as easy as, moving on,
Sure.
And there's good things to move on from, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of putting the work necessarily into where they're at, who they're at, or the relationship they're in, they just scroll into a different situation or, a different person.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. Jen, how about you answer this one? I know you have to go soon, and I completely understand. We can talk about stopping the broadcast here, and because there's still more to get through. We haven't even gotten to the religious aspects of it. We should have talked about that before the broadcast, but we didn't. But do you want to answer this one before you head out?
Yeah, read it again.
Oh, sure. Think about it also. Why are there so many relationships in conflict that individuals can't find a wavelength that brings them together?
There's a lot of answers for this question.
Sure.
I think the one I will pick is are we talking marriage? Pretty much.
I think you can make it whatever you want. Just relationships in general are in conflict. I don't think it has to be marriage.
So I'll say just on the marriage aspect. I mean, this could be other relationships, but marriage. I think sometimes people get into marriage and they think that's the finish line. That's why you get a lot of, you hear a lot of couples, whether it's the husband or the wife saying, you've changed.
Yeah.
You're not the person I married.
Right.
I think it's what is the word I'm looking for? Oh, Nez rubbed off on me. I think it's misleading to think that when you get married, you're going, you know what I mean? Because I thought this too. I was in that same camp where I thought, oh, you get married and you and your spouse stay the same person. I just didn't understand. But we are hopefully growing and changing every day.
Yeah, right.
And hopefully that's for the better, not the worse. Sometimes one or both, it's for the worse. You just never know. It depends on the person. But and I think sometimes people don't really want to grow and change and be accepting of the person they're within that growing and changing, growing together. So you could get both people or one person just being really upset that the person hasn't stayed the same.
Sure.
That throws a wrench in the works. And then on the side of that, sometimes you have one person that doesn't want to change and the other person is growing and changing. And that's hard. I mean, it's hard for both people, but I think the goal would be to continue to grow and evolve as a human being as you're living life together side by side.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Sure.
yeah. And I do think, we could do a whole show on this, but I do think there's some issues with patriarchy. I think it's,
Oh yeah.
unfortunately, it opens some trails of abusive and toxic stuff,
Yeah.
unfortunately, in my opinion.
I would agree.
So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Is it okay if I say goodnight, guys?
Yeah. Well, let me, before you go, let me ask this, Glenn. This seems like I know you put work into the write up and everything, but it seems like we could separate it and talk about the religious aspect of it next week, or we could continue without Jen and get through the next couple of questions. What do you
I'm
prefer?
easy. It's easy to run either way.
Well, I would.
Anyone in chat want to weigh in? I mean,
Yeah. I would prefer to have Jen here. We've talked about doing the broadcast earlier because she's going to have to start getting up a lot earlier, but we can talk about that off air. But I feel kind of like it'd be a good idea because this is an important topic, and I don't see myself with the religion idea. I feel like there's a lot to discuss, and 30 minutes may not cut it.
sure. Well, then, why don't we continue up to that? I think we've got a bit of room to expand some stuff here anyway. So
Okay.
if that's what going to suit you. That suits you better, sure.
It does. Let's do that. So go ahead and say goodnight, Jen, and then I want Glenn to answer this last question at the first half of this, and then I'll close it down and we'll be done for tonight.
All right. Good night, guys. Great discussion. Loved the answers, and just appreciate everybody that came out and popped on and listened and talked in the chat. And we're
Yeah.
a part of this conversation, and just pray that I get some good sleep tonight.
Yeah. Praying that your
tomorrow.
mind will get quiet enough to.
Yeah. I'm going to take some melatonin.
Okay.
Love you guys.
Chill
Have a
out,
good
Jen.
night.
Chill.
I know, right? Chill. Hold on to Jill.
Thank you, Jen.
All right. See you next week.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, Jen just got a new job, which she's very excited about. She will be nannying for a new family. Pays a little better. The hours are a little bit more, and it seems not a better family necessarily, but just seems like better suited for Jen for where she's at right now. She just went over there tonight for a couple hours to get the lay of the land. It's a very large house, from what she says, very beautiful, and a wonderful family. And the kids are a little bit younger. When she did the nannying before, she did have a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 16-year-old when she started. And then it was just the two younger ones that she dealt with. The other one had her own car, and she wasn't as much in the picture. But she was with them for 3 years, and she felt like it was time to take a different role. And she applied for a lot of jobs, and there wasn't a whole lot out there. And so she just on a kind of a whim applied for this job, and she'd actually taken another lower paying job working with the elderly, and she was kind of excited to do that, to minister to them and all of that. And as soon as she accepted the job that Saturday, she heard from the nanny job, and they wanted to talk to her on the phone. So they did. They talked for about a half an hour, and then set up a time to meet. And she turned the other job down before she even got the other job, which ended up being a good thing. And so, long story short, but she has to be there in the mornings by 7 a.m. So this is being the first night. Hope you guys understand. I know you will. She's going to need to try to shut her brain down, because I don't know about anyone else, but for me, after I do the broadcast, it takes a couple of hours for my mind to calm down enough to go to sleep. So we are discussing starting the broadcast earlier for the sake of Marisa and her wonderful daughter being to sleep on time when school starts. We've talked about starting a half an hour earlier and then ending a half an hour earlier as well. So still doing 2 hours, but instead of 8 o'clock, starting at 7:30. So I don't know how that works for everyone in the chat, but if you could weigh in on that for me, if it's a problem for you for us to start a half an hour earlier and end a half an hour earlier, we would love to hear from you. So you can pop it in the chat. You can send us an email. Marisa will be putting her email if she didn't already. Oh, she already did. There it is. Okay. Let her know. Let us know what your opinion is of that. And also, as she said at the beginning of the broadcast, we are very open to your ideas for topics and what would you like to hear us talk about. Or if you've got a true story, please share it with us. That's what the show was originally all about. I wanted to read people's stories and have conversations about them. So let us know. All right. Before we close it down for tonight, Glenn, you need to go on this one if you don't mind. Think about it also. Why are there so many relationships in conflict that individuals can't find a wavelength that brings them together? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, just thinking about through my personal history, everyone up before Sandra did not eventually work out, even though there were still good connections there.
Sure.
Because I was not being 100% authentic. And you know what's the worst part of that? I knew I was doing it, and I could feel the conflict within myself, but I didn't have the courage
Sure.
to be totally authentic.
Wow.
So it was very interesting scenario, because one of the first things that Sandra and I said when we got together in person was, I think it came from her, I'm pretty sure it did, was if each of us is not 100% authentic right from the start, this relationship will probably not, see the light of day at some point down the track.
Right.
And it's right. I've never seen anything to suggest that that isn't a good way of seeing it. Because we just made that resolution. Look, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how much courage it takes, you've got to front up.
Sure.
And sometimes, as we know, it's hard to ask or put forward a point of view because you feel like it might cause this kind of disquiet or might cause ripples.
Yeah.
But for what I've found is that it's an illusion.
Yep.
If it's going to cause any ripples, it's better off to do it from a place of honesty than it is from a place of deceit.
Amen.
So, authentic.
Excellent.
That's what. That's
authentic is everything, and we throw that word around a lot, but I have grown and grown to think how important it actually is. Being authentic in a relationship is everything, regardless of religious belief or any belief. Just being authentic, being your own authentic self, and the other person being authentic is super important. And for me, it's not so much about what we struggle with, but it's being authentic in the relationship that we can work through anything. I really believe that you can work through it if you're both being upfront and honest. And
isn't that one of the fundamental premises of setting a role model for yourself and others?
Oh, sure. I think it is. Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you for the write-up. We've got a couple more questions, and then I think probably Glenn will be able to figure out a way to incorporate the last couple questions into part 2, or we'll just continue part 1. We'll talk about that.
Could we? Is it possible to do the last 2 questions down until, or whatever's left until the religious part starts? That'll make it a lot easier.
Well, there's.
How many is there? I haven't got the read.
Oh, no, that's okay. So there's one more that relates to role models. I'm happy to go over that. But then the next one is, when love is a common element, does it not bring people together rather than separate them?
I think, look at the role model. I think that's a good place to close.
Excellent. That makes sense. All right. So the next one is, thinking of this, what is the role model you wish to set for yourself? That makes sense. And I'm happy to go first. I think I've done that on almost every question tonight. I guess I have a lot to say after being away for so long. The role model I wish to set for myself, it's a beautiful question. And I can't separate myself from the influences of other people. But what I can do is take the things that work for me as a person and use those, and I can throw the rest out. I don't have to follow any kind of role model that my family sets or church sets or whatever. I still to this day see Christ as a role model, and that's part of the problem. It's not that I have an issue with what Christ tells me to do. I have an issue with the way what Christ tells you to do is not followed by other people. But that's their problem. It's not mine, and I see that clearly now. Yes, do I still have an issue with what other people don't do? Yeah, but I'm working on it. I'm working on not focusing on that. Just worry about myself. I think if everyone just, as Glenn said, with being authentic, if I'm authentic, regardless of what other people do, and I'm focused on being the best version of Cripps that I can be, the rest takes care of itself. And so for me, role model I wish to see is someone who continues to grow and change and becomes more and more authentic, more open, more honest, who focuses on being present and not, as I said at the beginning of the broadcast, not assuming that the circumstances of the past will repeat themselves in the future. I don't have any control over the future. All I can do is take today in hand. And that also is biblical. I mean, the way that's phrased is don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of the things of itself. Well, for me, it's not just about worrying about it. It's just like focusing on. We have a choice, as Jen said. We have a choice to focus on different things. We don't have to just lay plague to whatever thoughts run in our head. I want to be generous and kind, and I want to be kind to people in traffic. I want to give people grace, whether they give me grace or not, and that includes family and strangers and everyone. I want to be the light that the Bible says to be. I want to be loving. I want to love God with all my heart and love my neighbors myself. And it starts with me. That's the thing. It doesn't start with, well, other people don't love me and treat me well. Well, that's probably true. But how are you treating yourself? How are you loving yourself? I'm asking myself that question. I want to love myself to the best of my ability. And again, it's not being self-absorbed. It's having a self-respect and a self-love. And I do believe it's biblical. I do believe that verse is about, in order to love your neighbors yourself, you have to first love yourself. I mean, how many times have we talked about that? Well, guess what? It's becoming more and more true to me that's what's necessary. That's what I have to say about that. What do you say, Glenn?
I say a lot of pretty well. All you said is really spot on. I think there's so much of this part of this role model is acceptance of other people, even when they're different.
Right. Oh my gosh.
That being, like I said before, wanting to be of service rather than wanting to take.
Yeah.
I think when you have all of that, you tend to rest a lot easier. When there's that being like that, I don't see that you have that internal conflict that some people do. When you're being true to yourself, and I think it's just amazing. The more you come to that realization that just being a good, kind-hearted, and generous person, actually is of great value to yourself and to the community.
Sure.
I mean, it doesn't seem difficult, but why? I don't know why it is. Probably because people want to take more than they want to give, would my guess.
Well, I would agree. I think most people do want to take, and it starts out when you're children. You find a toy to play with, and you don't want anyone else to play with it, even if you're done playing with it. How many times have you seen that happen? Kid's playing with the truck, and he picks up something else, and then some other kid goes and picks up the truck, and he gets mad, tries to take it back from him, and the teacher says, well, you weren't even playing with it. It doesn't matter. I mean, it is a selfishness that we all have, and hopefully as we get older, the selfishness goes away. And for some people, it doesn't seem to diminish. But it does if you are being honest about who you are as a person and see yourself clearly. And that's where the introspection comes in that I think is missing just in general. I mean, yes, there are people that are willing to look at themselves. Otherwise, nobody would be authentic. Everyone would just be out for themselves and no one else. But fortunately, we do see the world is not a garbage dump, as I've thought so much in the past. Yes, there are some things that are horrible in this world still, but I see it a little bit more clearly than I used to. And you see it mainly when there's some kind of tragedy. I'll just briefly say back when Hugo hit here back in the late 80s, a lot of people had fallen trees. So it was basically a hurricane that moved inland into this area, and power was out for a lot of people, some people for months, but pretty much for everybody for a couple of weeks at least. And trees laying in people's yards and limbs, and as I mentioned, no power. And what I saw back then was people getting their chainsaw out and going and helping their neighbor with their trees. Now, that's the way I grew up. I grew up with community and people doing things for other people and banding together. If a guy's barn burned down overnight, what people did is they got together, they chipped in to buy new lumber, and they all helped raise the barn, build a new barn for the person. And I had begun to feel like that wasn't the case anymore. Like, people weren't looking out for anyone else. They're just watching out for themselves all the time. But you see these little pockets when there's a tragedy in a certain area. And I experience this at the job I do. I do customer support for Sunbelt Rentals. And with this storm, Debbie, that came out, a lot of people in Florida, especially on the Gulf Coast side near Fort Myers and Sarasota, that area in there, they had like 4 feet of water, 3 feet of water in some places. And a lot of people were without power, and a lot of desperate people. And they couldn't run the stores down there, the Sunbelts down there, because they didn't have power either. So what they did is they got generators, and they opened up the doors for people and did the best they could to get people the stuff that they needed. Mostly generators and dehumidifiers and water pumps to get the water out of the basements and get the water out of the house and get it outside somewhere. And here in Fort Mill, South Carolina, they set up a special room of people to take calls for people in distress. And that's what they do. This is a corporation that does this. And yes, they're renting equipment, right? They're making money from it, of course. But they don't have to get people to come from different areas and set up a room and take calls from people and try to help them get the equipment that they need. They don't have to do that. But it's something they offer. And I'm proud to work for a company that does that. And it changes the way I feel about a corporation. I wish more corporations would do that. And this isn't just for the way that it looks. I mean, they really want to help people. And I think that's a good thing. So that's one example of how the world is not as bad as it seems like it is all the time. So if more people have that attitude, when someone is in need, do the best you can to help them. That is very much what the Bible says. You feed the hungry, you give water to the thirsty, you visit the prisoner in prison, give clothes to the naked. So that's what Jesus says to do. And how often are people doing that? And to me, it's not just those things. It's how much are we there for people that are struggling emotionally or spiritually? It's not just financial. It's, are we there for other people? I think there are more people that are there for others than we think. It's just not the biggest news article. It's just not as widely published. But I think we can do better. I really do. And again, going back to this, it starts with yourself. That's where it starts. It doesn't start with someone else. Starts with me. Starts with you, in my opinion. Marisa, you're last on this one. What is the role model you wish to set for yourself? What do you have to say?
I'm going to say I've decided to follow Jesus, and there is no turning back. What better role model to have, especially when you're wanting to be of service in this dark world? I can't think of anybody I'd rather emulate except maybe John the Baptist or the Apostle John on the Isle of Patmos. For having a little longevity there when things get really rough. But no, just to continue and press on towards the mark of the prize of the high calling in Christ Jesus. That's what I want. That's the only role model, really, I think, at this point worth having.
Mm-hmm. Can you share what that looks like for you? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but for someone that didn't grow up in a church and doesn't know what that is for someone, what is, in your
It
opinion?
looks like what you were talking about: feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, clothing the naked,
Sure.
visiting those in prison.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Okay. Thank you, Marisa. Appreciate that. All right, we'll shut it down for tonight. Thank you guys for coming back. We had about 10 people in there at the highest, and mainly 8 so that's about back to normal numbers. I mean, sometimes we've had more, and sometimes we've had less. Last week was a lot less. That's why we did an introductory broadcast, and we're just grateful for everyone that comes by. If you're listening to the broadcast after the fact, do us a favor, come in and be part of the chat if you'd like. If that's not something you're interested in, we certainly understand. We're grateful that you're even spending time putting us on your headphones or listening to us in the car or whatever, however you decide to listen to us. We'll be back again next week, and we'll continue with Glenn's series. He'll probably incorporate the religious aspect of this and then see what else he does with it. We'll go from there. But I hope everyone has a good week. And for those of you that are praying people, just pray for Jen tomorrow on her first day of the job. I'm sure it's going to be fine. As I mentioned, she met with the people tonight and got the lay of the land of the house and got a list of stuff and a schedule for the next month. And we're both just very blessed. It's been a rough couple of months. I mean, we normally struggle financially anyway, just barely making it, and a lot of people are in that same situation. It's not just us, but it was a miracle that we survived on just I mean, Jen did some eBay stuff, but essentially surviving on just my income since May. So for almost 3 months, May, June, July. 3 months. I'm amazed that we were even able to do it. So, but I said all that to say, grateful that she has something, and it's a better paying job than what she had before. And it's God willing, it's going to allow us to be able to move forward, maybe even save some money to go to Australia at some point, which is something we both want, and go to Michigan next summer, which is something we used to do every year. But since Jen and I married in 2020, we have not had the money to do it. And so it's a family vacation that we do with my sister and her husband and their kids. And we have been Michigan together, but not for that reason. We went when my grandparents were going to sell their house, and we went to help with some house stuff, getting it ready for the market and all that. We were only there for a weekend. I'm still grateful for it, but anyway, it's a good thing. And if you're not praying people, I think the thing is good. Put some good vibes out there, and we're okay with good vibes, and not a problem for us at all. But thank you for being here. Good night, everyone. We'll see you next Sunday. Glenn, do you want to take a second to say goodbye to the people? And if you have any closing comments, please make them.
Yeah. My closing comment is Coco left me alone for a while. Celebrations. Good to be here, and not annoyed the crap out of. Jim, I've got a small world, haven't I?
Yeah. I think it's a big world.
It is. No, I'm just kidding, but
yeah.
Anyway, I was just thinking one thing about the role model thing when I saw my brother and Jonathan when we met Nez. I mean, I thought, yeah, well, this family's got it together. So.
Yeah.
It was really, really good to see it in front of me. So they're generous, kind people, my family. So lovely to see it. So. So I'll say good night.
Okay. Good night, Glenn. Thank
See
you.
ya.
Marisa, last but certainly not least, if you could close us down, say a few parting words if you have anything you want to add, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Jason. And the family I met of yours, Glenn, was just lovely. You did your country great honor representing. Well done, sir. Well done. You were all just lovely to meet. I'm still smiling. Oh, thank you, everybody, who participated in the discussion tonight. Thank you, everybody who jumped in the chat. Thanks to everybody who catches the replay. And thanks to anybody who shares the stream out on their social media. Looking forward to picking up where we left off, hopefully next Sunday, right here on True Story Live. Everybody have a great rest of your week, a good day or good evening, depending on where you're at. God willing, we'll see you here real soon. God bless and good night.